Hey guys, it's Matt. Welcome to Speed Tutor. I'm going to show you how to create your fully functional door system to be able to click to open and close the door, to be able to collect a key and add that to an inventory, use scriptable objects and to be able to extend this and then check to see if that key is in your inventory to be able to open a specific door. I'll even show you how to add sound effects for opening and closing, and you can extend this massively. And I have a full kit on the Unity Asset Store called the Door Interaction Kit, including a load of advanced features like opening chests, different angles, delaying sound effects, custom save system for all your keys. But this is a great way to get yourself started. Do let me know what you think down below, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do check out all the links down below for Unity's massive sale. And if you're following along with me in this tutorial, there's a bunch of free assets on the Unity Asset Store that I've got. And I will also put the full project on my Patreon, so you can get hold of all the scripts, all the code and everything. The first one is the classic interior door pack 1, which you can import into your project. We've got the key and lock. I've got the patio table, just something to hold the keys, and then the door small sounds pack. And it's got quite a good bunch of 30 sounds in here too. Okay, so I've imported some of the assets in, which include a set of doors. Remember, I'll put annotations down in the timeline so you'll be able to skip onto parts that are important to you if you want to ever refer back. This is a part about importing assets, so I've imported in the doors. And remember, I'm in URP for Unity 6, if you go to Window and you go to Rendering, you may need to do the Render Pipeline Converter, click Upgrade Materials and click Initialize and Convert for any materials that you brought in which are not specifically for URP. So all of these assets needed upgrading. Once you do that, everything works fine. So in my scene, I've got 3 different doors. You could see my doors, I've renamed them, that they have this frame object, and then they have the door and the door handle. And you can see based on the pivot point, you can rotate the door automatically because the pivot point has been added here. You can see I've got a bunch of keys, and all of these actual door objects themselves have a box collider. I do actually have the sound effects which I added, and I've got a couple of others which of course I'll put on my Patreon to do a key pickup and a door lock sound, but I've got the various door sounds from the pack which you can add depending on what you like. And then I have 3 different sprites, so I just rechanged the color of these little keys and made them 100 by 100, and I made sure that I set them as sprite 2D in UI, and I made sure the sprite mode was on single. So I've just got 3 different for the ones that we're going to collect. One thing I will mention is it might be worth you creating a canvas to create a little dot in the middle of the screen, so you can right click, choose UI and choose canvas, and then add an image to that canvas. And when you've done that, you can just add the knob image into that and set the scale to 5 and 5, and you'll get a UI object right in the center of your screen. It can act as the sort of crosshair. To start off with, we need to create ourselves a raycast so we can detect specific objects that are in front of the camera and to be able to use them in the way that we want to interact with things. So I'm going to go to my scripts folder, right click, and I'm going to create a script and just call this a mono behavior script. This is in Unity 6, if not, it's a standard C# script. I'm going to call this DoorInteractor because this is something that's going to be used to detect everything in the game. So I'm going to have a new namespace at the top called using Unity Engine.ui. I'm going to have serialized fields and private fields, one for the raycast distance, which is just a float, and then a key code for the interaction key, which is based on the old input system. You can add the new one if you like, and just an image for the crosshair that we're going to update when we find an object. I do want a private reference to the camera. You can make this public if you want to put this script on another object other than your main camera, but I'll just have it so it's on the main camera first. Then in the start method, I just make sure that camera is equal to get component and find the component of the camera. As I say, you don't need this start line if you add the camera to the inspector. I've got an update method now, and I'm just going to call a method called perform raycast, just so we can keep this nice and neat. So in our perform raycast, we'll say if physics.raycast, open brackets, and we're going to reference the camera because we want it from the center of our camera, and we'll say viewport to world point, which is going then to be the new vector 3, open brackets 0.5f, comma 0.5f, close 2 brackets up after there, add a comma, and then add lowercase transform dot forward, comma, out, raycast hit, and then we'll just call that hit for short, and then just call our ray distance. Then we'll end those 2 brackets, and I'm just going to add the curly brackets underneath. So this is just a simple way to call a raycast from the camera's location, and we just look at the very center of the screen, so it'll take the viewport, so the screen, go to the center, which is 0.5 and 0.5, it'll send a ray out forward, and it will go the distance that we specify. So up here it was just 5. You can set that in the inspector. We actually need to be able to start finding objects with a particular script that might be important. So now we're going to refer to a new script they're going to create. So we'll go to our scripts folder, create a new mono behavior script, and I'm just going to call this DoorItem. And this script is going to be relevant for all the items that we want to pick up, because it could be a door, it could be a key, and we're going to update that a little bit later. So at the top, I want private DoorItem, and I'm just going to have lowercase DoorItem. So this is going to be referencing that script that will be on the interactive objects. So I'm just going to write variable underscore DoorItem is equal to hit dot collider dot get component, and then in angle brackets we'll put the DoorItem. So it will find the component that we need, and then we're just going to say that if DoorItem is not equal to null, then we must have something. So we must have something in front of us. Then we'll say that our DoorItem that was our private variable up here is equal to the new DoorItem that we found, just so that we can then use this more easily. Then you might want something, if we found something, you might want to highlight the crosshair if that's something important to you. Then under here we'll say else. We're going to want to say, if we haven't found an item, we just need to make sure that we clear it in any other place. We're going to create a method called clearItem, which is going to clear it. And then underneath the if statement for the raycast, we also want to do the same thing. We want to have else, and we also want to have clearItem as the method that we're going to use. So underneath the entire perform raycast, we can create a new method called clearItem, as we wanted to before. And we'll say that if DoorItem is not equal to null again, then we know we must have something, and we want to clear it, so then DoorItem is equal to null, and then we can turn the crosshair off. Take away the comments here, and then we're calling that item. And then in my case here, you could add this to, say, a UI manager or something, but I'm just going to highlight the crosshair here, and the crosshair is just going to be, if it's on, when we specify it's going to be red, and if it's off, it's going to be white. So we'll make sure we can call that method and just give it the Boolean parameter, so that we can say in this case, the crosshair should be off because we've cleared the item. If not, we highlight the crosshair. So now we've found all this, what we're going to do is we're going to also check for the input, so that if we found an item and we press a button, we must be able to do something. So we'll just do, I'm going to give this a method name called interaction input. So just below here, I'll have void interaction input. And then we'll say in this case is that if door is not equal to null, we must have found something. If we use the get key, which is the interaction key, which you can specify in the inspector, then we want to run a method in the DoorItem and say whatever method we want to run. This could be non-specific to loads of different objects, and that's why we're going to make DoorItem a more of a generic item that we can use. So we can already test this out if you want. Now, if we go to the main camera and I just add my door interactor, you can see that the raycast distance is 5. Interaction key can be, let's do something like E. We're looking for the crosshair, and I'm just going to add the crosshair image. Now, we need to make sure that our doors, all of these doors that we have, I'll open them all up. You can see my green door, blue door, and red door, and I'm just going to add the DoorItem script to there. There's nothing on there currently, so it doesn't really matter, but because we've got that DoorItem script, it will find some. But I'll just remove it from the green door to give you the example. So now if we press play, you can see that blue makes our crosshair go red, just between my yellow circle, and the red door goes like that, and then the green door doesn't do anything because it didn't have that script on it. And we can add the same scripts to our keys because they're going to be using the DoorItem script as well. Okay, we're going to move to the DoorItem script. We're going to create a public enum so we can choose between the different types. So I'm just going to call this item type. I'm going to then create my list under here. I usually like to start with none, and then I'm going to have an item called door, comma, and then key. And you can add to this list if you wanted more items that you wanted to be able to interact with. I've got a private serialized field, which is the item type, which is the declaration to the enum. We're just giving it a name of lowercase item type and set that equal as default to item.none. So by default, if you add this script to anything, it'll just say that the item type is none until you specify. And now to be able to create some logic for doors or keys, you need to make sure that we're going to have a controller and a collectible for each item that we're going to use. So in our scripts folder, I'm going to create another mono behavior script. I'll call this DoorInteractable because it's going to be the interactable object, which is our door. I'm then going to create another new script and call this KeyCollectable, just so we give those nice and easy names so they can be referenced in our DoorItem script. So we're going to have a private method called DoorInteractable. We can give this a name as lowercase DoorInteractable, and then another one which is going to be, as you might imagine, the KeyCollectable and lowercase KeyCollectable. Now in the awake method, I like to use a switch statement just to choose different objects that we've got. So switch, and then we're going to add the variable name for our item type, and then we're going to choose a case, which is case item type, and this in this one is our door with a colon, and now I'm going to set our DoorInteractable, which is the lowercase, equals, and then we'll just say the get component, the DoorInteractable script. And then you need to make sure you add a break on the end. I like to have another case, which is the item type as key, and we'll call this one the lowercase KeyCollectable. Set that equal to get component KeyCollectable with a break. Now you remember from our interactor that we had a method that we wanted to use called object interaction. So I'm going to get rid of that comment, and it's going to do a squiggle. We'll go back to this script and we'll create ourselves a brand new method, our public void object interaction. And this is going to be the method that's called when we click and we do something. And again, we can do a switch case statement, and I will just grab it from up here, paste it in below because we're going to need almost the same thing. I'm going to get rid of the statement in the middle because we don't need that anymore. Then on the door, we're just going to reference a method that we want to happen when we click on the door, or in our case, collect the key. So if we go to our KeyCollectable, we're going to create a public method called KeyPickup, and then we'll just have some logic in here to make something happen when we need it, either play a sound effect, get rid of the game object, add it to our inventory, but we don't need that just yet. We'll go to the DoorInteractable script, and we'll create a public method called toggleDoor. And this is a method that we'll call when we want the door to open or close. We go back to our DoorItem script. We can then say that the DoorInteractable with lowercase question mark dot toggleDoor, because we're going to run that method. And if it's a key in this case, as you might have imagined, we'll KeyCollectable question mark dot KeyPickup, and that's going to be the method we're also going to run. So now we're going to start off writing our door script to be able to make this open and close and be able to toggle the door exactly like we want. So what I'm going to have here is I'm going to have the door pivot point so that you can attach this pivot point to other objects if the door isn't the actual object itself. We've got an open angle, a close angle, and a rotation speed, and these are all the things that we need to make the door work. We are going to touch on some lock settings later on, so you'll be able to lock the door and use a key, and we'll also look at audio for when the door opens, but we won't concentrate on that just yet. Then I've got two variables, which are isDoorOpen and isAnimating, so whether it's open or whether it's currently moving. And then we also want another private quaternion as the target rotation, so at any point we need to know what position that it's in. So in our start method, we want to actually get the initial rotation. So we'll say that the target rotation equals quaternion.Euler, because it's used for angles. We'll say 0f, comma, the close angle, comma, the 0 for the x, y, and z axis. In our toggle door method, we want to say that if the door is not animating at any point, so it's not moving, then we want to say that isDoorOpen equals the opposite of isDoorOpen, because we want to always be doing the opposite if it's not already doing something. So almost toggling the state at which it is at any time. Then we need to set the target rotation based on new state. So we'll say that the target rotation is equal to quaternion.Euler, open brackets, we'll say 0f, comma, then we'll say isDoorOpen, question mark, against the open angle or the close angle, and we'll put 0f and we'll close that up. And then we'll say that isAnimating is equal to true, so we can start the transition of the animation that we want to do. Or in our case, not an animation, it's going to be just in the update method to move the door. So again, in the update method, if isAnimating is true, then it's got to be moving, so we're going to move the door. We'll say that doorPivot.local rotation, because we just want to move it around on itself. Quaternion.lerp, so we want to move this smoothly. And then this is based on the door pivot point dot local rotation, comma, the target rotation of whether we need to open or close it, time dot delta time times by the rotation speed. So we can set exactly how fast or how slow this should open. Then we need to also check if we're close enough to ending this movement that we can then just set it back, so then we can interact again, whether close it or open it. So that we'll say that if quaternion.angle, open brackets, against the door pivot, .local rotation, comma, the target rotation, which is less than 0.1 f, then it's very close to finishing and it's almost indistinguishable because it'll keep moving to the end. We'll say that door pivot .local rotation is equal to our target rotation, so we know that that's where it currently is, and it should always be at that final point that we specified. And then we'll say is animating is equal to false, so then we can toggle the door again if we click. So now we can test this out in our scene. I can go to my red door, for instance. I'm going to make sure my item type is a door, and we have the DoorInteractable script. And you can see that the door pivot we can specify, so I'm just going to add the object itself to it, because on the pivot you can see that we can move nice and easily like that. Now you can see that the open angle is 90 degrees, the close angle is 0, and the rotation speed is currently 2. Now what we'll do is try this out, and I can press E, and I can now open my door to that angle. Press E again when it's finished, and I'm pressing E and I can open it until it decides it is finished. You could adjust that 0.1 value or adjust the speed if you wanted to do that more swiftly. You could stop here now, and that's perfectly fine for some doors, but we might want to actually be able to collect keys and be able to open lock doors and do things like that. So now you might want to lock your doors and be able to interact with keys, but we'll need a few things, because we'll need to hold the information about the keys in a sort of inventory or something like that, and then be able to choose whether we want to pick up the key, then be able to do interactions with the doors. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a scriptable object. So I'll right click create, and I will choose scripting and choose a scriptable object. And if you don't know how to create that object, or you don't have the option in your version of Unity, I'll show you in the script. So I'm just going to call this key, and this will be the key scriptable object. And you need to do public class key and colon scriptable object, because the rest inherit from mono behavior, but this one doesn't need to because it's a scriptable object. And you can write create asset menu, file name equals whatever you want this to be, and then the menu name can be scriptable object as key. And I'll show you how that menu works, but you can give it whatever file name you want or create a little folder for these to go in. So with this being said, I'll have a public string and just as the key name, so we can give it a name if we need to use that in the future. We'll have an integer for the ID of the key that we might want to use, and a sprite, so public sprite, and have this as the key sprite that we want to use, because we're going to pass this to the UI manager to be able to show it on screen. So I've created a scriptable object folder. Now you can see I can right click, I can go to create, and you can see it's created me a new folder here called Scriptable Objects, and I can add a key here. I could then rename this to blue key, just so I know my scriptable object name. You can see up here, it has something for the name, so we could say blue key. I'm going to set the ID as 1, and I'm going to add a new sprite to it. It's going to be my blue key there, you can see. Now the scriptable object is all ready to set up and be used on our key. We just need to make sure that we adjust the script. So I'll go onto my blue key, and I'm going to add the KeyCollectable script. We're going to open that up, and at the top here I'm going to have a serialized field private key, which would be a scriptable object, and we'll just have a lowercase key because we're going to reference that scriptable object and use things on it if we need to. Then we could say in our key pickup script, if the key is not equal to null, so we've definitely got some information in the scriptable object slot, we're going to want to add to the library and then just set this game object to false, so it almost disappears, and we could test that out. It wouldn't do anything yet, so we need to create ourselves an inventory script, and it's good to keep everything in different scripts so we can keep it nice and organized. So we'll create another mono behavior script, and I'm just going to call this key inventory. Then what I'm going to do is have a serialized field, and we're going to create a list which will store all the IDs, because to store numbers is much more easier if you want to create a save system or something like that. So we'll say private list, but before I do that, I need to use the generic collections. So we'll say using system.collections.generic. So then I can actually access to list, because it's a little bit better than array in this case. Then after list, I'll put angle brackets, and we'll say integer. I'm just going to store those integer values, and then we'll say they'll call this that key IDs equal to new list integer 2 brackets and a semicolon. So that's created our new list that we want to make. And then I want to make sure that this inventory is a static object that we can reference from any script without any hassle. So we'll say public static. I'm just going to call this key inventory and have this as instance. And then it does give me a suggestion to create a public property to get and set it. It's just a good way to keep things more protected. Then in the awake method, we'll set if the instance is equal to null, there's none of this object ever before. This will be the current object that'll exist. And then don't destroy and load, so keep it around. And if it's any other case that one already exists and you try and create another, it's just going to destroy the object. So you can't have more than one of this object. We're going to have a public method called addKey. And then it's going to take a parameter of called key and lowercase key. Then we want to be able to take any key that we pick up and add this directly to our inventory. And this method is going to help us do it. So if we create the if statement that we don't want to be able to collect a key that we've already collected, unless that's specifically something you want to do. So we'll say the exclamation mark if the key IDs contains the current ID that we're picking up, we don't want to add it. But in our case here, we'll say that if we do key IDs.add, we'll just add the key.id, which is the ID from the scriptable object here. So we'll just add it to our list if we want to collect it. I like to add a little debug line to say that key has been added, and it'll add the key name and the key ID, and that will come up in the editor log to be able to keep things nicely visible for you, because you can't always see something on screen. And in your case, you might want to update the UI, but we'll do that a little bit later. And then we're going to have a public bool as key, again a parameter of key that will pass in the scriptable object, and then we'll say return key IDs dot contains the key ID. So we can check if we have a key already, so we can use this on the door. So then we know if it's a locked door and we have this key already, we'll be able to check and it'll just return the ID and we can see if we can match it. So if we go back to the key collectible, we wanted to add that to the inventory when the time comes. So we'll say that key inventory in this case, dot instance with a capital, then dot add key, because that's what we wanted, and then we want to add the key scriptable object to that list in the inventory. So I'm going to create an empty game object called inventory and just add the key inventory to that slot, and you can see the key IDs. There is nothing in that list. You could add some if you wanted to automatically carry keys by default. We don't need to do that. We can go to the blue key, and you can see that it's looking for the scriptable object, which is that blue key here. And remember, blue key in our case had the ID of 1. Remember to make sure on your key you've got the type as key and you've got the key collectible script with the scriptable object. We'll make sure we look at the inventory, and when we actually try and collect this key, we can look at it, press E, you can see it disappeared, and you can see in our editor log here, key was added blue key with ID as 1. Now, if we go to our inventory, like I see here, you can see element 0 in our key IDs, and you can see it's 1. Now, I can show you that this works exactly the same. We'll go to the green key, and we'll call that key. We'll add the key collectible script to that. It's looking for a scriptable object. So we'll duplicate that blue key scriptable, and I'm just going to call that green key. I will give it a new name as green key, and we'll put the ID as 2000 as an example, and we'll add a new sprite, so we'll use this later. If we go back to the green key object, add the new scriptable object here, then we can go back and play the game, and you can see we can collect the blue key and the green key, and you can see now blue was collected, green was collected with an ID of 1 and 2000 respectively. If we go into the inventory, you can see the element 0 has a value of 1, and element 1 has a ID of 2000. Now we know that we have those IDs related to those scriptable objects. So now we know that we can collect our keys, add them to our inventory, and do things like that. We want to be able to make sure that we lock the door. So if the door's locked, we need to be able to check if a key is there. So if we go back to our DoorInteractable script, we're going to add some brand new settings to the top, which are all about locking the door. So in my case here, I've got some lock settings with a header, and I've got a boolean if it's locked or not, and then I've got a private reference to the key, which is a scriptable object, and if it's the required key that we have in our inventory, we can then open it. So if we move to our toggle door script, we want to make sure that we check something first before anything else happens. Now we can start by saying that if is locked is true, then we need to be able to check something to happen. So we'll say that if key inventory dot instance dot has key, because we had that method to check, does that have the required key in possession? We'll have a debug line which finds the door and the game object name. And then I've just got a little quote which will say it's unlocked with the required key.key name. Then we'll say is locked is then equal to false. Then we can have a quick else statement and have the same debug and say that the door, which is a door name, is locked and you need the correct key based on the scriptable object that we're going to specify. And then we'll just say return. So if we get to here at any point, it'll never navigate to this section of code. You can write in here that if it isn't animated and is locked is false, but in our case, we don't need that at this current time, because if we get to the false, we'll always check this first and return otherwise back to the top to make sure we're checking if it's locked or not when we click. So if we click on our blue door, so we had a blue key and we set that to door, add the DoorInteractable script. In this case, the door wanted the transform point. We've got everything here. We can specify if it's locked. Now, what key should open the blue door? Obviously the blue key, so we can add the scriptable object, which is the blue key there. So it's going to check in our inventory, do we have the ID of the blue key? And if we do, we'll be able to open it. If not, we can't. You'll see by default, I'll go up to this, I'll press E, and you can see here that it says that the blue door is locked and you need the correct key to open it, which is the blue key. We can try again. You can see it's locked. Now, if we go over to our blue key, you can see that it's been collected and it's an ID of 1. And now we can click back on our door and you can see that the door blue is unlocked and you use the correct key, which was the blue key. And then we can interact as normal as if the door was never locked before. So then you can easily customize that for each of your doors to be able to use a scriptable object for each one and collect keys. This is an imaginary inventory and doesn't appear that on screen, but I'll show you in the next little bit on how to create your very own UI at the top to show the images when you need them. So now we want to be able to create a little UI canvas or something to be able to hold the keys and show them on screen. So we'll go UI and I'm going to choose canvas and I'm just going to call this my UI canvas. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set screen scale, screen size and height, find 1920 by 1080 because I like to do that for default resolution. On my canvas, I like to right click, choose UI and then just add a panel. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to 2D mode, zoom out of here, and I'm going to want to choose where I want to create my UI elements. So I don't want this to be a raycast target because I don't want to be able to click on it. I want to add a new component and choose a grid layout group. So then we can be able to make sure all the keys line up nicely and evenly throughout. And we can visually see that by right clicking, creating UI. I'm just going to set an image and you can see that it's going to set the image right at the top in the panel, but I don't really want to do that. I want to have the start corner as upper left. I want to have the start axis as horizontal. I want to have the child alignment on upper center. So you can see that there. We'll put it right to the top of the screen and you can have the constraint as flexible. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to padding and I'm going to go to top and I just want about 20 pixel padding there, just so that it isn't so close to the top. I'm going to have the spacing between each as on the X direction 30. So now when we duplicate the image, you can see that they appear along the top just like that. Of course, you need to do something to control it because you could end up going off screen if you're not careful. And, you know, it will keep, because it's a grid layout group, it will keep going down. But in this case, we're not going to be collecting enough keys. I'm going to hide the image component of the panel just so, because we don't really need to see that anymore. On that image object that appeared, I don't want this to be a raycast target, and I want to just keep this 100 by 100 is fine because it inherits from the cell size of the grid layout group, and because that's now the image that we want to use, that we want to update this image with a picture of the key, and we'll just call this the key image prefab, and then from there I'm just going to drag down and it's going to be put into our prefabs folder. And with that, that's going to be something that will instantiate on this panel when we come to need it. We can't see the panel because it's the image component's disabled. It's fine, we can now use that. We'll create a brand new script, scripting mono behavior, and I'm just going to call this my UI manager because this is going to make everything appear on screen exactly how we want it. So again, I'm going to use at the top namespaces, which is unityengine.ui and system.collections.generic. We'll start out by creating a public static for the UI manager to create an instance of it, so it's the only one that will exist. We'll again, in our update method, say that if the instance is null, the instance is this, otherwise we'll destroy it. And then we need another method that we're going to have, which will be public void, which we called add key to UI, open brackets, key again, just like we've done in our other things, and then we're going to have some information in there. But right at the top, for the new variables, we're going to specify some UI elements. So you can see that the key panel is the container for the keys to appear in, and then we're going to have the prefab, which we're going to instantiate on the screen and update the sprite in there based on the key that we've collected. Then what we're going to do is use a private dictionary, which is similar to things like a list or something like that, but we can actually hold two types of information. So the scriptable object of the key and the game object, which is the prefab. So we can link those together to be able to add the key images to the slot that we want to use. So at the very start here, we're going to see that if the key images contains the key, we don't need to add it. But if in any case that we don't, we can create this new one. So that we'll say that game object, and we'll say that key image, which is its own local variable. We'll say that we want to instantiate the key image prefab, comma, on the key panel. Because once we apply that to that game object or that parent, it's going to use that grid layout group to put it perfectly. Now we'll say that the key image.get component, and then we'll find the image slot of that key image, which was just the game object, which was the key item prefab. And then we'll say brackets.sprite is equal to the key, which is a scriptable object, dot key sprite. So we'll update that. And then we'll say that key images in square brackets key is equal to the key image. It's just so that we can keep track of all the key images that we currently have at any time. So it's the best way to integrate this would probably updating the UI when we collect a key in our inventory. So what we can do there is we can say that UI manager.instance.add key to UI, and we can just put in brackets key. So I'll add the scriptable object straight to that add method, scriptable object. Do we contain it? No. Then we can add the prefab and update the sprite image slot with what we've got already. Then I'll go to my UI canvas, and I'm just going to add my UI manager to that. You can put that anywhere else. You can see that the key panel, we need that panel that we had here. It's just there. And the prefab for the key image slot that we wanted to appear, we can add that there. So now with them all being tested, you can see that I can click on the red door and you can see it's locked behind the red key. Blue door's locked behind the blue key. Green door's locked behind there too. We can collect the keys. So you can see that I've collected blue and green. We try and select a red. We can. It's still locked behind that key. Now blue is now open. You can see the open door is unlocked with the blue, and we can do the same with the green. So we're on the last part here, and it's about adding some sound effects to be able to pick up keys when we open doors. When we close the doors, we want different sound effects, and we'll look at creating that. So first one, to be able to create something when we pick up our keys, because keys are going to be set as inactive or destroyed, you could have an audio manager to control of these, but I'm just going to show you a simple way of how to do it. So what we're going to do is have a serialized field for the audio pickup sound that we're going to have, which is just an audio clip, and then we're going to have a reference to an audio source to be able to make sure that we can play it on that one. Then in our key pickup method, what we're going to say that if pickup sound is not equal to null and the audio source is not equal to null, it's good to have this in case one of them was missing and it doesn't end up causing an error. Then we'll say that the audio source.play one shot is going to play the pickup sound. Best way to do this without an audio manager is I'm just going to create an empty game object here, call this key audio, add an audio source component. I'll make sure it doesn't have play on awake, and I'll just turn the volume down to say 0.2. And in this case, it can stay as a 2D sound, and we want to go back on one of our keys, so either the blue key or whatever key. We can just drag them all, and we can just add that key audio source to that slot. And then the sounds that I've got is just a key pickup, if you can hear this. So we're going to add that to the key pickup of this specific object. Now if we collect these, should hopefully have heard the sound effect for that. Now you might want some sound effects for when the doors are opening or the door's locked or something like that. If we go back to the top now, I'm just going to have a private reference to the audio source, because this is just going to be on each of the door objects. We don't need to be on a separate object unless that's what you want to do. Then I'm going to have 3 different serialized fields for audio clips, whether we want to open, close, or locked, and these are going to be all those different sounds that we want to use. In our make method, we want to say the audio source, which was the private variable, get component, the audio source, which is on this object specifically. So now if we scroll on down to the toggle door method, and you can see whether the door is locked here, we want to play a sound for the door locked. And then if that door is animating at any point, we also want to play a sound in here. But rather than referencing the long way to do that each time, we can create an intermediary method to do this and to control it. We'll say void play sound, open brackets, it's going to be the audio clip, and we're going to shorthand this just to the clip. Then we're going to say that if audio source and the clip is not equal to null, so we definitely do have something to pass to it, we can say audio source dot play one shot, open brackets, and we're just going to specify the clip, which was that parameter that we had. So now in our methods, we can just shorthand and just say that we want to play sound, in brackets, the clip is going to be the locked sound. And then in here, for when we do the animation, we can use the isOpen variable to be able to tell when it is automatically without specifying it each time. We can say that play sound, open brackets, is door open, question mark, then we'll have open sound or close sound. So depending on whether the door is opening or closing, it'll play the open or close sound respectively. Now we can select each of our doors, and I'm going to add myself an audio source on these. Make sure that there's not playing awake, and I'm just going to turn the volume down a little bit so it's looking for the specific audio clips. So we can add door locked sound there. And then I've got that folder from the Unity Asset Store, which could be metal door open for the open sound and metal door close. Now what I've done is added different audio effects for each of the doors on here. And now when I press play, you'll be able to hear the locked sound. And I'll be able to collect the keys and get some audio with those. Now when I press it, you could hear the opening sound and the close sound. And remember, what you could do with these, you could have a sound effect for unlocking, you could create a sound effect for putting something in your inventory, you could create a sound effect or a delay for sound effects so that you can make these match up with the movement of the door. You may want to speed them up, slow them down. I have my door interaction kit, which has all of this and hundreds of other features, notifications, with UIs, and with other things that are involved. So be sure to check that out if you're interested, and be sure to check all this script and everything that you need on my Patreon so you can get this all going without a shadow of a doubt. I'll put all the links down below so you know everything, and check out Unity's new sale for all of the best New Year savings that you can find. Big thank you to all my patrons. Special thank you to Peter Steiner, Verishutha, Jennifer, and David for their amazing support. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Cheers.